Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo.
For me, in watching it, there's a tremendous sort of joy, of appreciation that comes just from seeing excellence, seeing people who have trained their bodies and where they're responsive to their spirits and where they function well and where the movements are graceful or powerful. I mean, to me, watching, there's a great joy in that. I don't know, it touches something within me.
Joining Father Bacik in today's Reflections is Brad Rieger, a graduate student in special education at the University of Toledo. Today, Father Bacik and Mr. Rieger will be discussing Olympics and the individual participants. Now, here's Father Bacik.
Brad, I would like to talk a little bit about the Olympics, something that's occurred recently in the United States. I think you found a little bit of time in your busy schedule to watch some of the Olympics, and it was a fascinating couple of weeks to me, the way the great interest that was created, and especially afterwards, the parades when the athletes went around the country and were in New York and Dallas and so on, and these tremendous outpourings of sentiment on the part of so many people in the United States. I think it's worth probing that a bit and to talk about the Olympic Games. So why don't we focus in a little bit on the athletes and the individuals who were involved and sort of the vivid memories that people carry with them. I suppose a few of the names that came up would be Mary Lou Retton, an important person. I started saying Mary Decker because that, of course, was something that touched many people. Well, let's contrast those two. I happened to come up with those two. But there you get, with Mary Lou Retton, you have this dynamo, this energetic young woman, and her tremendous feats in winning the gold medal in what was it, the overall for the gymnastic events. And then the great tragedy of Mary Decker falling in that race. It really brings out the polarities maybe we saw in the Olympics among individuals. This great exuberance involved in performing well and coming through and reaching one's potential. On the other hand, the utter frustration involved in all those years of training and then not being able to complete the event.
Yeah, the Mary Decker incident was really amazing. Just the number of times they showed the replay over and over again, and just the patriotic nationalism of the Americans coming out saying, well, she tripped her at first, and then and then the press conference afterward, Mary Decker was broke down and cried, and just the amount of work that she put into it, and just the heartache of having that happened. It reminds me of the Jim Ryan in 1968, I think it was, where he also went down in a spill.
Oh yeah, the miler,
right?
Yes,
And just how I remember the Sports Illustrated pictures of him sitting on the track and just the agony defeat, like the Wild World of Sports showing the skier going off the jump and falling.
Well, we use that phrase. It's become such a cliche. One hardly wants to say it, the agony of defeat. But when you think about the frustration involved with people who've trained 4 years for an event, and in this case, this Olympics, many of them have trained 8 years because they didn't get the opportunity to compete in Moscow in 1980. And so you've got all this, you think day after day and hour after hour, and all that they have done, and to come and expect to perform to their best, and then something ends up going wrong. Mm-hmm. Well, we had the boxer, too, that happened to, who was disqualified for hitting on the brake.
Right, that supposedly replay was shown over and over again.
Yeah. And it wasn't so clear. I don't think that he really had done anything wrong. At least as I saw the replay, it didn't seem as though
it wasn't a malicious attack. When he said break, he didn't hit him on purpose. It was just one of those things. And just to see him afterwards was the disappointment of it.
He seemed to handle that quite well, though.
He seemed to handle it better than Mary.
Yeah,
as far as
right. Well, one could try to empathize for sure with those people that would go through that way. And then, of course, Mary Lou Retton, as I said, represents the whole other side of this. I mean, being able to stand there and receive the gold medal and hear your national anthem played and to have the tremendous high that goes with all of that.
One of the things the ABC did well, they did those close-up reports on the athletes, and they did it several times. They talked about the dedication. And Mary Lou Retton was one of the people that, she moved from her home and went and trained with this expert gymnast coach, and she gave up her normal lifestyle to train just for this. And it's almost, there's a sense of justice there that she put this much effort into it, or that she did in the end get a reward, and she was rewarded for her hard work and dedication. Well, I think that's one of the reasons why people felt so good about her winning and doing so well, is because she was deserving of the award because of the amount of work that she did put into it.
I think probably her personality had a lot to do with that too, don't you think? I mean, her winning smile, and I have that image of that determined look on her face as she was preparing for the vault event, as she would run down. I know, boy, she ran so powerfully, and there was such determination. I think, and then her face would reveal her emotions so much, and that's another thing that strikes me is like, the tremendous emotion involved when you see these tremendous athletes and break down very often, and many tears shed during the playing of the national anthem. And I think of the one, it's Jeff Blatnick, is it? I'm trying to remember his name. He's the Greco-Roman wrestler who had cancer.
Yeah, and
he fought against cancer, and then he wins this thing. And I remember the interview. I mean, he couldn't even stand up
right
straight.
After the match, right?
That's right. And he was crying sort of uncontrollably and couldn't talk. And one could just imagine what had gone into this man's life and the kind of courage he'd shown in battling cancer and then doing well in the Greco-Roman wrestling. And a lot of times we say in the United States that men can't show emotions or aren't supposed to show emotions. And here, this seems to be one place where it's all right in a way. So we saw our American gymnasts shedding tears and very emotional interviews with them after they had won. And they had a broader purpose in that. Many of them kept saying, well, geez, this shows that, we can do it as gymnasts. Maybe this will make this a more important sport in the United States, give more young people a chance to participate and so on, broaden out the activity, which seems to me to be a very healthy kind of thing. So a lot of times their emotions weren't just involved in their own personal self, it seemed, but were involved in a larger picture. In fact, this Jeff Blatnick, if I've got his name right, I think every time I saw him interviewed after that, when he was more composed, he would always mention the other 3 or 4 Greco-Roman wrestlers from the United States who had won something, and it was always in the context of, well, maybe we're doing something more important here, opening up this sport again to larger numbers of people and so on.
I think the same type of thing is true for the women's volleyball team. Volleyball in this country isn't as big abroad, and I got, again, those close-up reports and reading articles about them, that these women dedicated their lives to volleyball and to being the best there is. And they, since 76 or whatever, most of them have been in training 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, and they've given up families and they've given up careers, and then they're volleyball players. And just to hear that type of dedication and that type of, and they're saying just to bring volleyball into this country and to make it a viable sport, and to see them go out and the emotions they played with, they ended up getting the silver medal, I believe. They didn't win the gold, but just to see at the end, even they were hugging, just like, hey, we gave it our best shot, and we've done a lot for the sport, and we should be proud, even though their disappointment was there, they didn't win the gold.
Well, they are a good example of the self-sacrifice that's involved with many of those athletes. And for a sport, I don't imagine there's a lot of professional opportunities for them in that sport. And I don't even know if there's a lot of money involved in it in any way for them, although I guess they were subsidized, weren't they, in some way? I mean, how could they live together all that time? And
I really don't know how that works.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But surely that it is this example of total dedication to something. I suppose some people would watch that and say, well, that's stupid, why would they put in that much time? And I guess until one has participated in athletics or knows it from the inside, maybe it is a terribly difficult thing to understand.
Yeah, it's like, but get on with life and get a real job that day.
Yeah, right. Why are you fooling around with this thing? But I guess their moment of glory, many of them would say that it was worth it. And here, interestingly, as you said, they didn't really win the gold medal, did they? They won the silver medal, and still found, I think, a lot of satisfaction in that, although I'm sure there was great disappointment as well. Well, we're talking about these individual athletes, Brad, and what it all means. We can talk about it perhaps a little bit as a spectator. For me, in watching it, there's a tremendous sort of joy, of appreciation that comes just from seeing excellence, seeing people who have trained their bodies and where they're responsive to their spirits and where they function well and where the movements are graceful or powerful. I mean, to me, watching, there's a great joy in that. I don't know, it touches something within me. Probably going back to one's youth where one would want to learn that kind of excellence oneself, or just an appreciation of the fact that people are able to do well and achieve in that way. Do you find that in watching yourself?
I do. I think for me the main thrust is in the appreciation of the effort and the 100% effort and trying to do one's best or using one's abilities to the fullest, and the training that goes into that. Because I played basketball and baseball, football since I was a little kid, and I always was one to train hard. And those are very lonely times when you're training by yourself. I mean, training, you're running up football steps and running miles and sprints, and so I could relate to the behind the scenes, the road to the end, so to speak. The end product is the actual competition, but there's something about the loneliness of a long distance runner, that type of feeling, and that feeling of, it's almost a spiritual feeling that you can, even though you're with a team, you still have something that you've put in for yourself, and it's the effort that you've put into it, the years, especially with the Olympics, years of work.
And a lot of that is a mental training, isn't it? A mental toughness that comes out. I was thinking Edwin Moses was one of the more impressive figures to me that emerged throughout the Olympics. Of course, he won, over 100 straight 400-meter hurdles. Yeah, I mean, just an amazing record. I don't know that it's really paralleled in any way. I can't think of any other examples of someone who's dominated a particular sport as he has. But then they did one of those personal profiles of him and his wife, and she was totally dedicated to it as he was. And but he did it in it was largely mental training, I think. And they used a lot of computer things. I noticed one place he had something strapped on him to check his pulse and heart rate and so on as he was training and getting ready for it all. The way he went about it in such a systematic and intelligent way was impressive to me. I don't know if some people feel that takes away from the spontaneity of sport or not, but the moment of spontaneity, the moment when he performs with absolute perfection in the hurdles, has such a background to it. And, this constant practice and support of his wife and going over moves and counting the steps and checking out one's health and heart rate, all of that sort of thing is part of that impressive thing, I think.
One of the things that sticks in my mind, maybe the opposite of what we've been talking about, is the women's marathon. I forget what the lady's name was, but the one who came staggering into the stadium.
Yes, right. I know who you mean. Her name is Gabriella Anderson Sheath.
Yeah, where was she from?
I think she was from, I want to say, Switzerland, was it?
It might have, yeah, that sounds...
I don't know. I don't remember exactly. But anyway,
I remember I was watching that, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to watch, I think. It was, and even, I don't know who the comment, one of them was Marty LaCory.
Yeah.
He was a runner, and he said he couldn't watch it. It's like someone should take responsibility, and it's like to the point where individual effort, it's almost, you go to a point of stupidity, and I think that's the contrast where, these people have dedicated their lives so much that it becomes almost an obsession to finish, an obsession to do well, and then the sense of balance, the sense of perspective really goes out the door. And when everything works out fine and when people are winning, it seems to be a sense of goodness. But then that pointed out to me is like, what we really have a sense, there's something wrong here to let someone come staggering in and
that's really a good example. I wonder what people's reaction is to that in general. Now, I think the story has sort of a happy ending because she's not hurt.
No,
I heard the
fine.
Commentators saying that you could get brain damage as a result of this, that it was a matter of dehydration and body heat and so on, and that, you could... Well, if that woman had, actually gotten brain damage or been permanently hurt, I'm sure we would have heard a great outpouring about it. I think it's sort of lucky in a sense, or fortunate that nothing bad happened, but watching her stagger around there, it really was a moral dilemma, wasn't it, in a way? I mean,
saw the officials walking beside her.
Right. It was a moral dilemma as I was watching that, and it tore me up, and it produced a really strong emotional reaction. And I had the ambivalent feelings. I mean, one is this woman wants to do this, she's trained, she's worked all this time, and she, ought to have the opportunity to finish, and on the other hand, it seemed so foolhardy, and as the commentators were saying she could get hurt, then I kept saying, why doesn't someone grab her and stop her? I guess what happened, she doesn't even remember a lot of this.
Right.
And so evidently the bodily reaction is that you are not composed of mind at that time. You're not
Right.
thinking. In fact, your limbs aren't functioning correctly. That was such a poignant thing. You know, one of the interesting things about that, of course, is that it's the first time there's been a women's marathon,
Right.
and women have only gradually gotten more events in, and I think it's been based on this idea that women can't do these things. And then to have, if there would have been a tragedy, I think it would have been a terrible thing for women's sports generally.
Yeah. But I think that really sticks in my mind, that seeing her come staggering in, and just the idea of the individual goodness of sports, I think, was taken to the limit there, and that there's goodness in just the attempt, and the attempt would have been fine if they would have taken her.
Yeah, she still would have.
Right. She's still a gold medal winner to everyone.
Right. The crowd reaction was interesting, as it was with many events, with the crowd reaction in cheering her on and so on. I'm quickly contrasting that with Carl Lewis in the long jump.
Mm-hmm.
And the crowd, I guess, booed him. I didn't see this, but evidently the crowd was very negative and somehow feeling that he wasn't putting forth maximum effort. That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, the local favorite, and everyone is there precisely to see him win gold medals and so on, and yet you have a negative crowd reaction to him, to his performance.
And he ends up winning the prize.
Yeah, even though he won the event. I wonder if it is connected with this idea that he didn't put forth maximum effort, and that's what maybe people are looking for.
I think also maybe, at least I had trouble, this is my own personal impressions of Carl Lewis. I had a hard time dealing with him. I had a hard time cheering for him, you know, as far as like he had an aloofness about him, or I don't know, more almost too individualistic approach to the sport or to his goals, or maybe that's just my.
Do you think that the commercialism had something to do with it? I mean, I heard some people say they didn't like him and weren't thrilled with his performances because he often linked it with making money and the commercialism. Now everyone knows these days that Olympic athletes, many of them do make a lot of money. They get endorsements and so on. I wonder if that commercialism side of it sort of touched into this.
I think so. It's a commercialism, and for me, it's a lot harder to think of them as amateurs, even though they're technically still amateurs. But that seems to be a very vague term now. It's almost just a label.
Yeah, the one wonders what it means. You think back in the past, Jim Thorpe, a great athlete. I'm thinking the 1912 Olympics or around there. I'm a little vague on that, but he won the gold medals and was, our super athlete and so on. And I think he got stripped of those medals, I think, because he had taken some money for playing in a few baseball games. It was a minor kind of thing compared to what athletes get today.
Yeah.
And yet, in those days, this pure amateurism was made such a big thing of that they stripped him of his medals. Of course, I think one of the neat things is they were returned to him at some point,
right.
But that's quite a human interest story with Jim Thorpe. But that's a great contrast to what you're saying, and the way the situation we have today, where there's so much stress put on the fact is they get a lot of money.
Right.
I mean, that's
and I think that takes away just from the purity of sports and the purity of what they're doing out there. I think it's hard to keep in mind that that they're doing this just for the thrill of sport, but with the payoffs of money and hoopla on TV, it just seems to, for me anyway, takes away the glitter takes away from what they're doing out there, and that comes from me being an athlete and what I've gone through as an athlete as far as training and everything. It does. There's a sense of wholesomeness back several years when big bucks weren't involved, and TV. I think TV is a big thing for me too. Just it brings people together, but at the same time, it seems to. It somehow is it does. It adds too much glitter to it, and
you're really big on the purity of sports, aren't you?
I'm big on that.
Yeah, and that helps you to see some of the negative side of the Olympics.
Yeah, but then at the same time, no, it's like I said, things have changed so much. The idealistic of the purity just isn't there. And so I appreciate the effort, and that's not so much the perfection, but just the effort of people going out there and giving it their best shot.
Another thing that I think delights us just in watching it is some of the strategies, and I found that especially interesting in volleyball, knowing very little about it, but in watching you quickly pick up the tremendous strategies that are involved in that and the different plays they have. I found that to be fascinating, and I think that's those of us who like sports, I suppose, delight in that side of it. It's interesting to me, the team cooperation idea that our basketball team could beat the NBA All-Star teams with some of the best players like Isaiah Thomas going and so on, and yet because I suppose of the team concept or of playing together, we're able to defeat those NBA All-Star games. Teams that blew my mind.
I know that the Olympic basketball team was an amazing machine as far as just going out there, and Bobby Knight just doing the job he did as far as bringing together a group that he molded in the way he wanted a team, and just see him do that to the NBA All-Stars, and then it's almost like why should the other team even show up? I mean,
in a sense, I mean, I think that lost a lot, that there wasn't more competition for them. But they've no doubt had their hardest games before the Olympics ever started. And our women basketball players did well, too. That was interesting to see them and the great skills they developed and the great teamwork that they were able to achieve. So, I mean, that delights us as well, too, doesn't it? The strategies, the teamwork, the cooperation that's involved. And, how about talking about sportsmanship? I mean, it seems to me, and a lot of times we saw that. I mean, losers congratulating winners. I think sometimes there were cases where the pro-American crowd, people in the United States cheering for other people, the Romanian women gymnasts, for example. I thought that was good. I mean, I thought there was something positive about all of that.
Yeah, there were times that you did see that. One of the things I heard was the place where the Romanians were staying, like they all ate together or something, and the hostesses made it a point of making the Romanians feel at home. Since they were the only Eastern Bloc country really there, they made it a point of making the Romanians feel at home. For some reason, that sticks in my mind. That's devoid from any type of competition, but just that type of sports.
A good feeling about it all, Yeah, I think that what happens to us, I think, as we watch these good performances is that it resonates with us in a way. It touches something within us that we tend to appreciate. Part of it, I think, is this spirit-body connection. So often our bodies don't do what we want them to do. A lot of times they don't look like we want them to look. They don't. They get tired, fatigued. We have this great sense that we have a body and that it's almost a drag. When I'm out on a golf course, this happens to me a lot. Stand over that golf line and think, why can't I swing right at that
you always
ball?
hit them into the trees, too, into the forest.
That's right. I mean, it's, there is this sense of that we are whole creatures, that we are integrated individuals, and I think our dream or ideal is that our body is responsive to our spirit, that our body would do what we want it to do. It would be flexible and lithe and limber and perform well and so on. And so often, much of our experience is the opposite. I mean, we're working, we get tired, our bodiness drags us down. It's such a difficult matter to keep the body in shape and so on. So there is one side of us that says, I have a body and I want it to do better or to be better. And maybe when we look at those Olympic athletes, we see that. It represents this ideal. I mean, the pole vault, the guy running forward and going up and just arching perfectly and pushing off and all of that. Maybe that just thrills us in a way about what's possible or what we dream of or what we'd like to be true for us.
I like that. I like the idea of the spirit and just moving you forth into using all your talents. And but I think it also relates to the idea of the spirit is the biggest thing, and not in the winning or again, that's where it gets back to the purity thing, just in the effort or in the will or in the your attitude and all that. A lot more important than the end product of the winning, and that kind of relates to us as human beings as far as the spirit moving within us to give our best effort to love others and to care for others and to be Christian people and but not strive for perfection, not hoping to get the gold medal all the time, that type of thing.
That seems to be really crucial to the spirit of the Olympics. I mean, there is the fellow who founded the modern Olympic movement said this. That's when the Olympics began again in 1896, and after not having them for 1,500 years or so. And he said that the most important thing in the Olympic Games is not to win, but to take part, just as the most important thing in life is not to triumph, but to struggle. The essential thing is not to have conquered, but to have fought well. Now, that has sort of been a guiding spirit of the Olympics. I mean, I don't know how, it's not pure again. It gets colored with other things, people taking steroids or drugs to perform well and not dealing with defeat well and so on. But that quote does represent maybe the highest ideals of the Olympics, where individuals can come from around the world and do their best. The most important thing is not to win, but to take part. And, I think I saw that in some of the people, some of the athletes afterwards in their comradeship and so on, that they did really have a positive sense of having competed. And that really is a marvelous kind of spirit, I think.
Just to see the celebration in the closing ceremonies and people dancing in circles and that type of camaraderie, that you could see the celebrative or festive
side of it. And I'm thinking too that maybe the other thing that we do when we're watching as participants is to have empathy for those who lose, the frustration of the people who, as we start out talking about Mary Decker and so on. We had sort of two symbols maybe in our conversation, if I can pull it together in some way. One is Mary Decker, who represents frustration, agony of defeat, and maybe when we look at her, we can empathize that. We know what it is to fail in life, and it touches us. And the other side, maybe Mary Lou Retton is representing this exuberance of victory, the exhilaration that comes with all of that. And maybe she represents for us a lot of these positive things we've been talking about, athletics, speaking to us of excellence, of delighting our senses, of speaking to us of sportsmanship and amateur striving and so on. Maybe in all those ways, then, the Olympics do speak to us of deeper ideals of what life might be all about.
You've been listening to Reflections with your host, theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo. Joining Father Bacik in this discussion was Brad Rieger, a graduate student in special education at the University of Toledo. The topic of this week's Reflections, Olympics and the individual participants. Comments or questions on this show or suggestions for future topics should be sent to Father James Bacik, Catholic Campus Ministry, 2086 Brookdale Drive, Toledo, Ohio 43606. Funding for this program was provided by the Catholic Communications Campaign of the Diocese of Toledo.